because it's not rooted in abundance and overflow and knowing that I'm going to get this or something better. It's like, I want this so bad and I'm so desperate for it, and everything is going to crumble if this thing doesn't work out.
So you want to make an impact. You're thinking about starting a business, sharing your voice. How do women do it that handle motherhood, family, and still chase after those dreams? Well, listen each week as we dive into the stories of women who know. This is Call Me CEO. There's a lot of chatter around the feminine and the masculine energy. What does it even mean? And what can we do so that we understand better how to know when to push and when to pull back? Well, today's guest, Anna Lozano, is going to teach us all about it and give us real-world examples where she has made the change and found so much more success in the feminine. Let's dive in. Welcome everyone to another episode of Call Me CEO. This is your host, Camille Walker, and today we are talking about energy, frequency, how to improve the good mood in your life, in your business, and the flow of everything that encompasses that with Anna Lozano, who is a multifaceted entrepreneur and also a mother of two living in Canada. And when I saw her bio and what it was that she was all about with creating a life of balance and energies and how do we really tap into the feminine, I was like, yes, let's have her on the show. So Anna, thank you so much for being here. It's a joy to have you.
Oh, so excited. And then we had our pre-convo. I'm like, this is going to be juicy.
Yes. It's really fun. I love having a pre-conversation with someone and it's automatically, we already have some good energy flowing. So I'm like, let's get into this juice. So tell me about how you got into this business. You've sold a business recently. Take us down the path of the last 10 years of your entrepreneurship and what's happened.
Oh my gosh. It's been 13 years, which is so wild. I'm like aging myself, but it's like how quickly time flies by. I was born into a Polish immigrant family. We came to Canada when I was 6 years old. And so the programming really was get good grades, study hard, get a safe and secure job in the corporate world, and then retire with a pension. So as a good little girl, I did just that. And then I arrived in corporate. I looked around. I was like, whew, this is not for me. So I'm like, sorry, Dad, for investing, $60,000 into my business schooling, but peace out. Like, this is not for me. And so that was really my first moment of like, surrendering and trusting that there has to be another way. There has to be something that is more meaningful and purposeful for me in this world, in this lifetime. I knew it was bigger than just me being in corporate and doing that for the next 40 years. And so I took a leap of faith. I actually entered the world of entrepreneurship through network marketing. And it's funny because you're like, I'm in Utah. I'm like, I used to go to Salt Lake City every year for conferences.
Okay, which one? Because dish that juice. We know that this is a mecca of MLM. So yeah, which one?
So I grew a huge business with USANA, and
okay.
I've just layered in another network marketing company into my brand that's actually not in Salt Lake City. It's out of Germany, and it's all to do with frequency. So I'm a huge fan of the network marketing industry because it really was my gateway into entrepreneurship. And so as I surrendered, raised my hands in the air and said, like, what am I here for? What's next? I was introduced to the world of network marketing. And I said, you know what? No preconceived ideas about the industry. No, people talk about pyramid schemes. I didn't have that programming. Like, I was very programmed to go corporate and climb the corporate ladder. So when this presented itself, I was like, whoa, this is incredible. You're telling me I don't need to have a product or service-based idea, and I get to plug and play into a system representing a product that I totally vibe with. I'm like, this made so much sense for my business mind. And I said yes. I jumped all in. I quit my corporate job in sales and marketing. And within 4.5 years, I got to the top of that company. And that right there really was my evidence of I love entrepreneurship. I'm actually really good at it. And I want to continue on this path. And at the same time, it was also my gateway into personal development. So I had, when The Secret came out, 2006, I believe, I was fascinated by the concept of the law of attraction and really consciously manifesting your dream reality. So now actively pursuing like my own growth journey by entering into the space of network marketing, I started to experience a lot of shifts, especially around reprogramming beliefs and codes around money. As I mentioned, I was raised in a Polish immigrant family, and money was always a hardship. It was a tough topic of conversation within my home. So I started doing a lot of work around reprogramming subconsciously my money beliefs and blocks and patterns and all the good stuff. And so that was my real first evidence. And I talk about collecting evidence a lot, because how do we know what we love? How do we know what our purpose is here if we don't try? Right. So it's kind of like trying and experiencing and living and slowly becoming this embodiment of this next version of me. And around that time, I became a mom. And because affirmations and that conscious mindset work was foundational for me, one day we were having a play date in my basement with a dear friend of mine. And we looked at our kids, we're like, wow, like perfect, clean slate human beings. Like, what if they were raised on these foundations of mindfulness and affirmations and gratitude, and rather than having to go into the personal development world years down the road, like, let's set this foundation for them. Like let's raise mindful children and at the same time work on ourselves, right? It's a beautiful exchange. And so we got to work and we created a company called Love Powered Co. with the desire to power the next generation of mindful, conscious leaders, being our children. And we did that through physical products. So our first product was affirmation cards for kids. Then we went into mindfulness cards for kids and connection cards for kids. And what we realized, and you and I talked about the blogging world, I think you said 2011. So this was now 2017. It's when blogging was really cool. It was, really growing as a way to build wealth online. Like, it was really cool. We thought, okay, if we can get affirmations into the hands of like really cool blogger moms, even if they're not into the spiritual woo self-development space, they love beautiful and meaningful things. Mm-hmm. And this is going to be our strategy to really scale quickly in the world of spirituality, but also in this world of bloggers and influencers that was up and coming. And we experienced real fast success. Obviously, the pandemic, shook things up, but we were able to scale successfully to the point of selling the company just at the end of 2022. And as I said, I just do multiple things at once. That's what my human design personality is all about. And so for full circle moment, like, I'm back into network marketing, and I had to do a lot of work around that in terms of being like, okay, I've built this brand and I'm this multifaceted entrepreneur. What does going back into network marketing look like for me? But it is so much deeper. Like, I feel right now, I'm here to make this industry cool. I'm here to make this industry like a whole new paradigm of building businesses in community through leverage in this elevated frequency, and especially, around the conversation of wealth consciousness. So I know I just layered a lot, but my journey has been 13 years. But as we can pick out, the foundation has really been the mindset, the frequency, and the embodiment of an elevated frequency. And then the strategy piece, which I love, specifically around sales and marketing.
Okay. Yes, there's a lot to unpack there. And like you say, we go through these phases of growth and change, and I think it's beautiful. And I've always said the messaging of, if you are multifaceted in your interests, hooray for you. Because I think too often we hear messages of, you need to pick just one thing to find success. And I don't think that's true. Maybe it's picking one or two things in a season of your life, but that doesn't mean that you have to stick with that thing forever. And so your story is obviously evidence of that. And it's funny because I'm like 99.9% sure I got your affirmation cards sent to me, and they were beautiful. You'd probably have to hold them up for me to be sure, But yeah, like I did get those. Yes, and they come in a box.
I have the women's deck
Oh,
here.
I didn't get the women's deck. Mine was like for little kids. Did you
The
have
kid-
one for little kids with like the cards were like maybe about 5x7 size ish, and then they have like an animal and then like a little yeah, like I totally got them. That's so
totally
fun.
good. Yeah, me decks, which is like connection, mindfulness, and gratitude for kids.
Yeah,
I
that is
love
so
that.
fun. Well, very cool. So I'm curious if things went so well with this affirmation company and it was very much aligned with what you were doing, what gave you the motivation to sell it?
Well, we knew starting out that we really wanted to grow a product-based company that
Mhm.
eventually would have a successful exit. That was
Okay, that was part of the plan.
desire and intention at the very beginning. Now, the interesting part was the timing of it. So what we didn't know is when would a good time to exit the company be, and we also knew that, being on a high would be the best time to sell. So it was interesting because COVID really hit us hard as a product-based business. We explored many, many ways to manufacture our cards in Canada. I remember the last quote I got from a Canadian company was $75 cost to make these
Wow.
products in Canada. So I'm like, we would have to sell at $150 an affirmation set to be able to manufacture in Canada. Like it was bonkers.
Wow.
So obviously we had to take the product overseas and manufacture overseas. So when China shut down, we were like 100 units from almost being out of inventory. And it just shut us down for 6 months. And so we had to pivot as entrepreneurs and really,
Mhm.
this is what I love about entrepreneurship is we get to be creative. We get to follow our, like, I always follow my intuitive hits, which has really led to a lot of the beautiful, synchronicities and successes in business. But for us, we decided to gift the digital affirmations because we knew this product was so important during, what we were all experiencing and going through for literally the first time ever in our lifetimes. And so we ended up gifting $30,000 worth of digital affirmations. And then I feel things blossomed beautifully. Like I felt like it was like a gift from God, a gift from the universe saying like, thank you for not throwing in the towel. Here's some gifts on a silver platter. So we ended up scoring a massive, massive collaboration with one of the biggest influencers in Canada post-COVID. So this launched 2021, which really scaled our brand awareness and allowed us to initiate the process of selling the company. And then the process of selling the company was also like a 9-month process, right? So as entrepreneurs, you and I were talking about the masculine and the feminine energies. Like it was really leaning into this trust and knowing that if we're taking decisions that are in full energetic alignment, things will work out for us and they will work out for the highest good of all. And so, when we talk about the masculine and feminine, that for me is a big part of it. Like leaning into my feminine energy means leaning into this trust. And not only when I have the good evidence, but especially when things get hard and you can't see if it's going to work out and you're getting rejected or things aren't flowing. This is for me leaning more and more and more into just this full embodied trust that it will all work out as it's meant to, even if I don't have control in that moment of time.
And that's a tricky lesson a lot of times if especially if things are not going well, because you may be in a place where you're thinking, what am I doing that's even working, or what is moving the needle? So if you were to talk to someone about leaning into that feminine energy, where is a good place to start if they're feeling like, especially if they're feeling like things aren't moving in the right direction?
Yeah. And it's this dance of like getting really raw and honest with yourself. Like, is it time for a pivot? Or, well, I don't want to say or looking at the energetics behind it. Because what happens as entrepreneurs is oftentimes we want something so bad that we start to grip it. And this grip energy is rooted in lack, in desperation. Like I always equate it to like that annoying, desperate boyfriend or girlfriend that is just like latched onto you. And literally that's what we are doing. Like that's what our human is doing when we want something so bad. We're gripping it so bad that we're literally energetically pushing it away because it's not rooted in abundance and overflow and knowing that I'm going to get this or something better. It's like, I want this so bad and I'm so desperate for it and everything is going to crumble if this thing doesn't work out. So the dance between being, really raw and honest, like, hey, is it time to pivot and is it time for a new strategy? And looking at the energetics, like, am I rooted in lack or am I rooted in abundance? And no judgment, just being, again, the observer of the frequency and what you're rooted in right now.
Yeah. And that comes down a lot to I love that you say being an observer and being curious about it, where it's not a place of judgment or feeling like time is wasted, but more an evaluation of, but how do you really feel? What is the underlying feeling of where you need to move next? Which I heard someone say once that women do speak in terms of, I feel, when describing something that they want or that they're going towards, where men might say something different of I am or I want, which I think that can, practicing those different statements with things that we're going for can be really interesting. Is it an I am? Is it an I feel? Is it an I want? And how does that line up with the ambition that you're going for? Would you agree with that?
Oh, I actually love that. I mean, I started a whole company around I am, right? Like it's so powerful. And when we talk about words specifically, so there's also what I'm bringing awareness to, especially with my kids now, is the frequency behind the words, right? So few examples, like I hope, I wish. Now my girls at 5 and 7 know that those words don't manifest. Because if it's a hope and a wish, it's going to continue to be a hope and a wish. So what we shifted to is I'm so grateful now that bringing that desire into the present moment and tuning into the feeling of how does it feel in being in that energy of that desire, right? Because it's really the feeling of it that allows us to manifest it into reality. So words are so important. And I mean, I am is the most powerful statement. And Wayne Dyer says this as what you put after the I am becomes your reality, but also paying attention to the frequency behind that, right? So like if you're doing your affirmations, but you're not wholeheartedly believing them, embodying them, well, those are weak affirmations. So how can you get the frequency behind the spoken word? So hopes and desires, stay in the hope and desire realm. I ams are extremely powerful, just watching the frequency behind it. And for me, the work that I'm consciously focusing on now is like, I think for me is a very masculine, I feel is a very feminine. And so the work, the embodiment work that I'm doing now is I'm a very naturally masculine energy woman. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, society has programmed, and this is, again, a decade of work I've been doing. Like when I entered the entrepreneurial space 2010, I had to be in my masculine. But now it wasn't always my empowered masculine. It was that wounded masculine of like, I got to compete. There's only one seat at the table for the woman. No collaboration, right? It's like, I'm going to hustle and fake it till I make it. And I'm going to grind myself to exhaustion and adrenal fatigue. But that's society's definition of how a woman achieves success. So I've been that until that stopped working. And so then I started creating my own evidence of like, God, number one, that doesn't feel good. And number two, it's not working. Like, yeah, it used to work, but it no longer is working. And really that, for me, that clarity came 2016 when I gave birth to my first daughter. And then now, so that's 7 years of like really choosing consciously to come back into this space of alignment. And there's a time and a place for the masculine, and there's a time and place for the feminine, and how can they dance together? And the feminine for me, a lot of work I've recently been doing is the negative programming around the feminine. So working with a coach, what I realized is that I used to think the feminine is weak, and that if you're in your feminine, you won't be as successful as if you're in your masculine. And I mean, this is deep rooted programming, like ancestral programming of our lineage, right? And so as I started to write out, like I have the list here, like what is the divine feminine? What does she mean for me? And who am I being as my most divine feminine self? And how powerful that is. Because that is all programming that, where did I pick that up from was really like my question to myself. I was like, shit, like, where did I pick this up from? Because it's not truth. And so that's the work that I'm actually diving into in this moment in time.
So let's, I want to hear what you're learning as far as, if you're looking at the opposite of the hustle, the grind, I'm going to show up, I'm going to work the hardest, I'm going to be the best. What is that opposite? What is that divine that you are able to tap into that allows you and even makes you aware to that power in the feminine energy?
And you nailed it. I mean, the first step of any transformation, ascension, growth is awareness, right? So for me, first saying like, ooh, okay, this is actually a belief that I hold. And I am choosing for it to no longer be my truth. So I have it written out here. So the negative side of being feminine /soft /delicate. So this is like literally what came out of me as I was doing this work. It's weak. It won't generate results. It's not powerful. It wastes time. People step all over you. It's not productive. You're taken advantage of. Won't make money or don't know how to. It's boring. It's slow. It's in the fairyland. So this is like, as I'm like, ooh, like, what do I think of, the very feminine? And then I was like, okay, so we're going to cross that out literally because of like looking at it. I'm like, that's not true at all. Like, I thought of it at some point in time, but I no longer desire for that to be truth. And so what I wrote about the feminine, I'm like, feminine equals potentiality. She's nourished. She's present. She's intuitive. She's fulfilled. She's happy. She's nurtured. She's wildly successful in all balanced areas. She's connected deeply. She's rooted. It's ease and flow. Extra productive as only focused on the right things. And she's released anything and everything that does not serve her. So those are my new beliefs around the divine feminine.
Ooh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us, because I feel like everything that you read in that first description, if I were to guess where those had come from, and I'm guessing many people who are listening too can think of those things and be like, well, yeah, anytime we grew up playing sports or being in the math class or being in a business situation, whatever the situation might be, there are very simply even language that's used where, I hate this term. Don't be a pussy. Yes. Or, oh, that's so sissy. Or, oh, you throw like a girl. It's like the language that we hear at a very young age is that the feminine is weakness. So I think that examining that of like, wait a minute, the vagina is the strongest organ that ever was. Like, how is
creation?
Right? Like, we build a body and pass it through our body. Like, it's the strongest that could ever be. So I hate that that's our language, because I think it was, I'm going to forget, Betty White, who said something like, I don't know why we say, like, don't be a pussy. She's like, it should be balls, because like they're the weakest organ ever. I can't believe I'm talking, but it's true. Like, but that's the programming and the language that we hear. That's what I heard growing up. I had 3 older brothers, and it was like, don't be a girl. And it was associated with this weakness. And so I love that you examined those words and created a new truth, or not even a new truth, but an awareness
An
because
awareness, because it's in there,
yeah.
right? It's in me, and I do feel those things. And you know what? Let me connect it to also because I'm raising two daughters, and you mentioned two
I
boys,
have 3 sons and a daughter. Yep.
sons and a daughter. See, and I'm like, I know this is my work in this lifetime because so I was doing this reading through a soul session with a coach, and she was talking about my first daughter who is an empath, and she's very delicate, and her soul is actually asking me to be more in my feminine. And so as she connected that, and started creating these new truths around the feminine, I'm like, and my daughter, this is what her soul wants to connect with me on. Like that's her, like she is teaching me this in my lifetime. And so that awareness of it, and that, like, that word delicate, like I'm actually putting that word on a pedestal because it is beautiful and it gets to be powerful. You can be delicate and you can be powerful. You can be delicate and you can be successful. So, I love this conversation so much because it is so needed and irrelevant if we're raising boys or girls. I mean, I'm feeling this rebalance for both men and women, because my husband is actually quite feminine in a sense of like, he always is in trust. He just knows that no matter what, things will work out for us. He is quite emotional, but embraces it. Like, it's not like he allows himself to show his vulnerability. And it's fascinating to watch my daughters gravitate towards that. And they also give him permission to be like that. Because I mean, I can't imagine being married to a very masculine man, like, because our personalities were just, we would not get the lessons we're meant to get in this lifetime. And so, yeah, it's just coming home. And I feel like it's just coming home for all, like for humanity.
Yeah. And what I really appreciate too is that men and women both have the feminine and the masculine energies, and they're not meant to be one or the other. It's really meant to work together, and that we can help to strengthen each other. And so with those predisposed ideals of what that looks like or what it should be for one person or another, I think that each of us comes so different. So it's really discovering, who am I? Am I giving attribution to both my masculine and feminine? And am I embracing others as well? And I think that that's really beautiful, to be aware with yourself first, so that you can then understand your children and your husband and other people in your life, your teammates, your employees, whoever that person is, because that's how we gain an understanding of us as a whole. And I just came off of listening to The Witch Hunt with J.K. Rowling. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Okay, well,
of course, my kids are all into Harry Potter right now, but
yeah. So my mind is really kind of in that space right now. I just finished. It's a 7-part podcast series, and it is so well done, and it talks a lot about men and women, and also transgender. This is going down a different road, but what I love about the presentation of it is that we are all divine in who we are, and that learning about ourselves and about each other only makes us stronger. But there are things that we need to know to protect ourselves and our children too. And so I just think that I love that you're doing this work, because helping people to understand themselves and where their strengths are, and maybe where they can lean more into the feminine, especially in the entrepreneur world. I feel like it's very much that culture of like, more is better, hustle harder, you need to work more, like figure out all the things. So I'm curious for you, for someone who is listening and maybe trying to sort out where to start, or even if there's like how to create your own I am statements or mantras, or getting in touch with their energies, like what would your advice be to that person who is just hearing this for the first time and they're like, what? There's masculine and feminine energies. What does that even mean? And where do I start to understand my own?
yeah, it's such a good question. It's like, I feel like this work is just this like beautiful introspection of, where are you right now? And just tuning in. Like, I know exactly what shifted within me when the way that I was living, the way I was being, the way that I was working and building businesses just stopped working. And that was really my first call, like my first invitation to explore doing things differently. But I knew it was connected to the energetics of it, right? So then it's a 7-year journey. And so I feel like one of the best books that I have read that really talks about, and it doesn't directly talk about the feminine energy, but it really does. Like it's not direct, but it's so beautifully intertwined into this book. It's called Rise, Sister, Rise by Rebecca Campbell. And I mean, it's such an easy read, but she talks about this actual, like this shift on the planet in 2012, where we've shifted into this Aquarian age, which so many of us are feeling that it's time to do things differently. And so I just invite everybody, like, I don't really have a tool, but to look within and be like, how am I feeling right now? Am I being called? Am I curious to maybe do things differently? And what would that next step be? So another example, just being quite rigid in my masculine of, I have to sit down, my work days are 6 hours. And when it's my work day, it's my work day, right? Like this was the Anna before. And when I sat down, I had to work and whatever that looked like for, my sales activities, my team, my marketing and so forth. But then I started to layer in this energetics piece. So before being like going for a walk in the middle of the day, well, that is crazy because it's time to work. But realizing that actually going out in nature naturally elevates your frequency. And then things start to happen. Things start to move. You're like, wow, I get to take an hour off and focus on my energy and how I feel. And those clients still purchase, or those sales through Shopify still come in, or PayPal notifications pour in as I took an hour off in the middle of the day. So you start to collect your own evidence, and then you're like, ooh, I'm going to do more of it because it feels so good. So I'm not saying take the whole day off, but I'm saying like last week for me, there was stuff happening astrologically, and I was being asked to slow down. And one of the way I was asked to slow down is this massive migraine came through, and I was like, okay, well, clearly this is my invitation to go and take a nap. I didn't nap for 1 hour. I napped for 4. Wow. So, it's like, but being okay with it before I would judge that, and I'd be grumpy that I wasn't productive, or, I didn't get done my to-do list. But now it's like, ooh, I lean more into it. And I'm telling you, like the very full schedule like I have this week doesn't feel good. I'm like, I'm actually excited for next week. That's quite, free in terms of scheduling. So play around, like it's going to be different for all of us, but what's the awareness right now? Like, what are you curious about? Lean more into that. Start creating your own evidence and continue to play with this energy, because we are being called to do things differently.
I love that. I think that this has been so wonderful to examine our own lives, the pace at what we're living, and maybe introducing some times of rest. I like to call it white space. And that's actually where I help a lot of entrepreneurs to hire out with virtual assistants, or help them to create more of a balance where you're actually letting go of, your to-dos and things that may not be serving you in the best way if you could expand your business or your life in other ways. So I really appreciate you talking about this. I think we have all learned a lot. I know I have. So please tell our audience where they can find you.
Yes. So on Instagram a lot, I hang out there at _Anna Lozano, and my website is annalozano.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, CEOs, thank you so much for spending your time with me. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please let me know in a comment and a 5-star review. You could have the chance of being a featured review on an upcoming episode. Continue the conversation on Instagram at Call Me CEO Podcast. And remember, you are the boss.